compensatory fantasy, a fantasy that seeks to compensate for the injuries done to our collective egos as African people. We tend to think of children as being involved a great deal in fantasy, but we must recognize that fantasies are things that are with us throughout our lives, and that we, even as adults, are guided by very powerful fantasies. As I indicated before, although there are a number of types of fantasies and a number of ways fantasies serve us both positively and negatively, we're primarily concerned with what I call the compensatory fantasies, because I believe that these types of fantasies retard our growth and destroy our genius as African people. I've indicated that fantasies are perceived as what we call ego defense mechanisms in psychology. That is, the means by which we try to defend ourselves against disappointment, against failure, against threat, against stress, anxiety, and fear. These emotions are highly upsetting and unpleasant, and certainly we try to bring them to an end as soon as we possibly can. We have mental means by which we try to reduce their intensity or to eliminate them, period. Some of the methods we use are methods that rely on the distortion of reality, of the denial of reality, of deceiving ourselves, or lying to ourselves, or backing back or retreating into our imagination and into dreamland, imagining the world to be what it is not, living under the influence of wishful thinking and hope, which will not see reality. This is what we mean when we talk about defense mechanisms. Defense mechanisms are designed to massage our egos and to reduce the pain of our egos, but not to solve the problems which cause the pain to our egos and ourselves as people. Which means then, while we may feel no pain, the disease that is destroying us will continue to eat us alive. And ultimately we may suffer death and damnation, even though we might feel good to ourselves. Many of the remedies that we see in the drugstores and other areas are what we call pain relievers, or symptomatic pain relievers. They relieve the symptoms of disease without curing the disease itself. And to a great extent then, ego defense mechanisms are pain relievers. They soothe us, but the disease and the problems that are the cause of our pain continues and ultimately may destroy us. Fantasies then are one of the major means by which we soothe our egos and the means by which we relieve our pain. We readily use ego mechanisms such as fantasies because they conveniently and often effectively soften our failures and reduce conflicting thoughts and feelings and emotions and so forth. They alleviate anxiety, and they help us to maintain our feelings of competence and worth. But as I've indicated earlier, reality continues to be what it is. I argued then in our last lecture at the African Portrait Theater that to a great extent, I believe many of our people responded to the articulations of Dr. King, particularly the ones where he talked about our assimilation with white folk. When he talked about little white boys and black boys holding hands and those other fantasies, I think he spoke then to our own collective fantasies, where we assumed that we could get over our pain as a people by merging with our enemies. We, like abused children, while being abused, were made to think that our abuse was the result and is the result of our color. It is the result of who we are as people, and not the result of the insane person who is doing the abuse. When we are being abused, often those people who abuse us seek to convince us that our pain is the result of our being different from them. And that if we were like them, if we talk like them, we look like them, dress like them, then we would not suffer. And therefore we have some people who tell themselves, when they suffer from the pains of the madness and neurosis of Europeans and the sickness that Europeans represent in the world today, we hear our people saying, they did it to me because I was black. This means that we leave then those who persecute us and exploit us and hurt us in all kinds of ways to appear to be normal, innocent. It is only our skin color, our differentness, that's the cause of the problem, not their madness and not their psychopathology and their illness. And we can only think this, ladies and gentlemen, and we can recognize this when we tell ourselves we want to be just like the people who destroy us. We want our children to go to school with the people who discriminate against us, who have enslaved us, who lynch us, and do all of the other things, and then we want to say, well, I want my child to be just like them. This speaks then to the depth of our own distorted minds and our own distorted fantasies. But it is understandable in terms of what I've said earlier to a degree. When we have been convinced that we are suffering because we are different, then it becomes understandable that we wish to end our suffering by trying not to be different, by trying to convince those who injure us and destroy us not to see us as black, even though we may be realistically black right in front of their faces, and tell them to look at us as if we are some kind of abstraction. We're not flesh and blood and dark skin and brown skin and what have you. We're not flesh and blood with our lips and our hair and so forth. We are just a man, just a person, just an American, an abstraction. We want them to act as if they're incapable of seeing color and incapable of discriminating color in the world. Ultimately, on a deeper psychological level, some of us then would hope to even merge into them and to become one with them, to no longer exist as a black people, to no longer be perceived in any distinctive way from other folk, and particularly from whites. We, in a sense then, in our pain, wish to become invisible and to commit biological and psychological suicide, to deny ourselves and to deny our identity in the hope of escape and in the hope of gaining what we perceive as the benefits of white society and European so-called civilization. This is a fantasy, as I had pointed out before, and it is a compensatory fantasy that is bound to fail. It will never be realized. And I will talk to you later about it. And even if it were, what people who had any pride in themselves, who have love for self, would want to disappear in the eyes of other people, and who would want to disappear in their own eyes? What level of self-hatred and self-alienation must exist in us that we would wish to see our lights fade away from this earth? What self-hatred and self-alienation would have us overlook reality? If you think racism is the major basis for conflict in the world, you could not be more wrong. The dream of some coffee-colored people will not end your pain. In South Africa, they got a group of coffee-colored people, and they just put them in a different category, didn't they? They called them coloreds. And so the society still stratified itself. If you know anything about genetics, it will be hundreds and thousands of years before you get a milk-colored race. In the meanwhile, you're going to still have the various shades of color, from light to dark. And knowing mankind, he will use those shades as a basis for establishing domination. And even when the shades disappear, there will exist class. There will exist culture. We have races of people today that you cannot tell apart, who still have the same genetic basis, but who still have a reason to fight and kill each other. Either reasons of religion or history or some other circumstance, reasons of class and whatever. You shall not escape pain by trying to escape into your white masters and merge into the white man. You may as well face the reality. The ultimate way of getting rid of pain is to get rid of its cause, not to hide in a state of self-deception.